Welcome to Personal, the podcast where we get to meet the real personality behind the professional. It is amazing to welcome Claire Nicholson Bell, owner of Dark of the Moon, to the studio today. I'll remind you of the rules. No business questions. If we touch on it, that's totally fine. No small talk. Honest answers only, and I'm happy for you to flip any of the questions back to me, which sometimes they're not relevant, but these ones today are really relevant to me as well. So, first question, Claire. We always open with quite a brutal question. How does it feel to experience infertility?
Oh, that is brutal and personal, because I think it's different for everybody. We all have our own. Journey's a word that's put out there quite a lot, and sometimes journey sounds like a nice thing, but we all go through our own emotions, experiences. We're all in this infertility space for different reasons, a lot of us. So it's lonely and it's brutal. It's brutal. It impacts you physically, mentally, every single work-wise, friendship-wise, every area of your life.
I understand all of those emotions. And that first one you touched on, the loneliness, is really impactful. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. But it's something that I'm a very open person, hence this podcast. And actually, through my experience of infertility, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast. Yeah. So if there's any good that's come out of it, aside from my amazing children, it's definitely this. But people just feel so insular. They daren't share it. Sometimes even I didn't dare share anything for tempting fate. But did you feel, clearly you felt the same because you were lonely too?
Absolutely. And I've got a really good group of girlfriends. We have grown up together. We've known each other since we were 4-year-old. Some of my friends have experienced infertility in IVF. And even then it didn't make me feel any less lonely. Because I think you get to a certain age, I think I was around 28 when I started deciding that I wanted children. The IVF process started when I was around 31, I think. And within that time, every single one of my friends started their families. They all started having children because we were at that age. They were all where they wanted to be within their careers. It was time. Everyone was getting married. Everyone was having kids. And like I said, I'm not the only one who went through IVF. And this is interesting. Like I said, everyone's in it for different reasons. My friends who went through it, we were all in it for different reasons. So one of my good friends had a definitive reason why she needed IVF. There was a problem to get through. There was a hurdle to overcome. I had unexplained infertility. So there was no reason why I wasn't getting pregnant, which made it even worse.
I know. In my opinion, because obviously it's everyone's different perspectives, but in my opinion, that's the worst because it's just like, why? And you can't treat something if you don't know why, or can't have a certain type of treatment to solve the problem.
And the process, I went through NHS treatment, and the process is quite cruel. And it's obviously done for some particular reason. There's reasons why things are done in certain ways, but I couldn't have certain investigations or tests until my IVF had failed 3 times.
Ridiculous.
So the frustration in that sense as well was, oh my God, you're torturing me. You're literally putting me through hell. Why could we not have these tests in the beginning? And we might find out a little bit sooner exactly what might be going on.
I think there's campaigns against it now because there's also the rule where you have to have 3 miscarriages before they'll investigate.
It's very similar. It's the same. I think that's the same thinking behind it. 3 failed IVFs, 3 failed miscarriages. Yeah. I think it's a similar reasoning behind why they do this. Cruel.
And if you look at it from the extreme of, they've got budgets, but still it's. My sister-in-law and my brother live in Spain, and unfortunately she went through a miscarriage last year, or maybe a bit longer ago. And in Spain, they look into it after the first one. Their whole process seems a lot kinder. Again, it's I believe it was the publicly funded process, but Yeah, and she was absolutely horrified that in this country you have to wait for it to happen 3 times.
And you've got your lottery. So one of our close friends lives down in Bristol, I want to say, and she wasn't eligible for the same amount of rounds on IVF as we are up here. She could only get 1. And after that, she would have had to pay. So there's a huge postcode lottery problem in this country as well, which is... I feel actually very fortunate that I'm in the Northeast and that I was able to access, because it failed so many times, that I was able to access that continuously through IVF, the NHS. But other people are not so fortunate. It's one and done, and then you've got to find the funds from somewhere.
Yeah, well, we had to, and I totally agree with this, because we conceived Cameron eventually after my first daughter naturally, and we were about to start IVF. They only fund for the first child, and I think that's totally fair, to be honest. So we had to go down that very expensive route, and luckily we did have the funds available. But again, a very brutal process financially, and lots of hidden costs depending on your hormones, how many injections you need, and you really realise when you go privately for something how much the NHS has to pay for certain things if it's the same sort of cost. And you take it for granted in some respects, but like I say, brutal that it's defined. I know people who've moved for IVF just to get out of that postcode lottery situation.
And you'll know as well as I do, you are willing to move. You'll do anything.
Yeah.
No cost is too little. I know somebody who remortgaged their home, and this was quite... And again, this particular person didn't have children, but her partner did, so they had to pay. So it's a minefield, isn't it?
It is.
It really is a minefield.
And it's hard enough going through all these lots of decisions and different options when you're mentally fit and well, which, you know, in a sense you could argue, yes, of course you are. It's a physical thing you're dealing with. But actually, one of the times that I broke down with my husband, because the private process, you know, we got a great result in the end. But the process, it was very transactional, and they didn't realise quite how emotional you are. And I kind of said, and by this point I'd gone through multiple miscarriages and a bit, I wasn't myself. And I said to Chris, what they don't realise is that they're dealing with emotionally broken people. It's not like you've just gone for a checkup at the dentist or something like that. This is a very emotional process, and the reception at this place. And again, I don't want to speak too badly of it, because at the end of the day, I got
absolutely
a great result. But everything was very public. You know, there were people arguing about their bills in front of everyone, and you just felt like you were just a piece of meat. Which essentially, you know, if they're doing that day in, day out, I guess there's a danger that, you know, it just becomes every day. Yeah. But I found it a very difficult process anyway. But then on top of that, next level.
And I think that's where like you said, you become a different person. And I think that's where the loneliness comes in, because you lose yourself. So by losing yourself, you lose some connections and friendships. Thankfully for me, that wasn't a permanent thing. And they were always there in the background. All I knew I had to do was reach out, and my friends would be there. But they kind of knew to leave me alone at the same time if I needed it. But I do think that's where loneliness comes in. You become a different person. You're not the same person anymore, and it changes you forever. Yeah, you're not the same person after.
You're right. And I think it was my dad that said to me, probably about 3 months or maybe even 6 months after having my second daughter, like, you're coming back to who you were.
Doesn't it feel good? When you finally sort of feel yourself again, you're like, you know what, I haven't felt like this for a while, and I'm finally feeling it's taken me years, Charlotte.
Oh, and I still don't feel I'm fully there. There's baggage that I've still got, emotional baggage from the journey. And I guess that's true of everyone as they go through life. It's impossible not to pick up some. But, you know, even you just saying that there, I got goose pimples, because also it's so gradual at times you don't even realise it's happening, and you don't realise you've become so disjointed from who your true character. So, yeah, it's quite emotional to talk about, especially when close family members clearly pick up on it, because you know that they love you so much and they must be hurting knowing that you're changing. But going back to the friendships, I totally agree. All my true friends, they were still there. And I remember doing some voice notes actually coming out to the other side of it. Sorry, I've just been disappeared for however long it was. It was just, I needed to do that to myself and just take myself away and deal with it very privately. I mean, I am so close to my parents, but I just couldn't take them on that early IVF journey with me. Yeah. Only Chris knew, and I was very precious about that. Again, for such an open person, I was like, Chris, we can't tell anyone. And I can't even really explain it now. I can to a certain extent. They'd already gone through so many ups and downs of the whole infertility journey, which in total were probably about 7 or 8 years. And every time I could see that it hurt them and I was responsible for that. So I just shut down totally, which probably hurt them as well. But it's the only way I could deal with it.
And I think it changes us, as we've said, but it changes the people around you a little bit as well, because people don't know how to act around you anymore. And like I said, all of my friends had their kids, and God bless them, they still invited me to all of the parties and the first birthday parties, and I would turn up and I'd be the only one there, and I would feel uncomfortable, and I knew they felt uncomfortable, but I knew that they were just being good people and didn't want to exclude me from the next generation of kids coming into our little fold, and they wanted me to be a part of it. But it got to the point where I just had to stop going, though. It just became too much. And then people stopped asking, but I know they were not asking for me. They were protecting me.
Yeah. I experienced that as well, both the positive and the negative. But it got to the stage with me where people wouldn't share that they were pregnant. And I just really didn't want that, because you always find out, especially with social media. So
Absolutely.
That was the new way that I found out. And I found that so hurtful. And in the end, I had to really tone down my social media use, because people weren't telling me. That was how I was finding out. And I remember as well, like even turning up to like a play date, because at this point I had one daughter, which, incredibly privileged. So that was, I don't want people thinking, oh, I was badly done to. Yeah. And then the person's partner who we were with was massively pregnant, so obviously pregnant. And I just didn't know what to say, because they clearly hadn't told me. They must have felt a bit awkward about telling me. So, and I don't blame them for that. But then what did they expect me to think, just bumping into them?
I came off social media for a year, for a whole year. Because it was just too much. Even people who I weren't close to, even just acquaintances on social media, it was just like, oh, there's another one. And you would get the people who don't know your life more personally, or you'll be next. When's it going to be you and Stephen? And then you're like, oh, do I explain? Do I just say, oh, maybe it's not for... I used to say to some people, oh, I don't really know if I want kids.
Me too.
Because it was just the easiest way to explain it away.
Yeah, me too. And I feel ashamed that I said that now, because I don't know, maybe it was self-preservation, but I should have been bold enough to stand up and say, we do really want them, but it's not working out. But then you don't want to put that on someone.
And you feel, oh, that person's going to feel so awkward. So you you're going through this horrendous thing, and you end up feeling bad for everybody else around you because of how your situation's making them feel.
Yes, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
It really is. And I think we do it to ourselves. It's how we frame the situation in our own minds. It is. So like when I said it stays with you, physically it stays with you. I think it's only this year that I'm finally starting to feel like I'm getting my body back. And it must be about 7 years since I had those IVFs. But that's 4 IVFs. That's 4 times practically being put into menopause. That's 4 times of having your whole system shut down, built back up. 4 times of your body being made to believe it's pregnant and then it not being pregnant. So I used to be hard on myself the last couple of years. I'd put weight on and things like that. And now that I'm slowly getting my body back and feeling I'm getting there now, I'm seeing like a light at the end of the tunnel, I'm realising that just how hard I was on myself and how it warped my body image, how I see myself in the mirror. It changed because your body starts to believe it's pregnant. So it starts changing. My hips everything changed the way it changes when you get pregnant for me. And then I didn't. So I was very hard on myself. And it's only now I'm getting to love myself a little bit more again.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because I didn't go through 4 rounds. I was very lucky. First, we only had in the end 1 viable embryo, and we're very, very blessed that it worked.
Miracle.
So blessed. And I do credit. We'll come on to that later. You for helping me through that, but I can't remember where I was going with this because it is so emotional. You know, talking about it, but still the toll that it takes. And so Camille is about 16 months now, and I think this is true of anyone who's had a baby as well, but just an extra amped up effect of all the extra hormones you've had through your system. Just figuring out like who I am, my body, and Chris is understanding, but I don't think they quite understand because they haven't had all those hormones pumped through your body. But said something about a casual question, is what are you wearing? We were at a wedding at the weekend. And I was just like, goodness, I haven't even had a chance to think about that. I see, you'd see your body so differently. And it's only starting to think about how I feel and how I look almost, because it's been I've been so fixated on the purpose of having children. And then when they're raising little babies, you just forget about yourself.
Your body just kind of becomes this almost hopeful incubator for all this time, and you don't see yourself as a person anymore. You see yourself as something that's broken, and this incubator's not working, and what can I do to fix it and to make it work? And that's all you see yourself as, this broken machine that's got something missing inside, or the cogs aren't ticking properly, or something's not right. And no matter how many people are tinkering away trying to fix it, for me anyway, nothing was fixing it.
Yeah.
And nothing did fix it because I didn't end up even getting pregnant by IVF in the end. So as much as I think that was a big thing for me as well. I went through all of this for all of these years, and then it wasn't even IVF that ended up getting me pregnant in the end. So I used to say, I really regret putting my body through it, but I actually think there must have been something through that helped in some way. I can't regret it, because there's a reason why those transfers didn't work, because there wouldn't be the girls that I've got today. So there's a reason why it happened, but yeah, you just see your body, it's just got this purpose. So it's not you anymore. It's almost as if you're outside of it, isn't it? Looking in on something that's not working.
Absolutely. Yeah, broken really resonates with me. And then just being a vessel almost. Especially, again, how the IVF process is dealt with sometimes. And often when people hear IVF, they instantly think of all the injections. How were you with the injections?
I was okay with the injections. I worked in the NHS for a long time. I was around a lot of medical procedures and stuff, so injections and things like that never really bothered me. I think it was more, I don't know, it was the inconvenience of them. So I had to go to Oxford for a work conference during one of my IVF cycles, and I had to take everything with us. So I was sharing a room with a colleague, and I had to do my injections and everything in front, and it was fine, but I mean, it's not ideal, is it?
No.
But life doesn't stop for this. You've got to stick to the schedule, otherwise, you know.
Yeah, even if you're an hour out sometimes. Yeah, I remember having so many alarms set on my phone. I was quite lucky that we were still in and out of lockdown at that point, but equally we were still at meetings. So taking them in my bag, some of them had to be kept refrigerated as well. Yeah. So bought a little cool bag. And just nipping to the toilet. Again, not telling anyone, try to keep it as top secret for whatever reasons. And just, nip into the toilet. And some of these toilets, they're not the cleanest of places, and just jabbing yourself with needles as you do. It became quite casual in the end, though.
The bruises, you get used to all the bruises on your tummy and things like that. So it ends up becoming like second nature.
But even I would say, and I don't know if you'd agree, the physical, and it's not just injections, the contraceptive pill that you take 1 of a day, typically, you're taking 4 of a day. And some people are, why are you taking a contraceptive if you're trying to get pregnant? But and I still don't really know all the answers, but 4 a day, where on the packet of the pill, it even warns taking 1 a day can increase your cancer risk. But that's how desperate you are.
Yep.
Like, I remember the pill that I was on, it said, do not take if you have endometriosis. And that's what I had a reason why I was infertile. That was certainly one of them. And here I have endometriosis, but here I am. I'll quite happily take 4 of these pills just so...
You go everything that you would naturally think to do.
Yeah.
Because you're just thinking of the result. And, I mean, they could tell you to take anything and you'll do it. You will do it because you become hyper-fixated and hyper-focused on this one thing, and everything else falls by the wayside. So they could tell you to eat coal, and you would eat coal.
Yeah.
If you thought it would get you pregnant.
Absolutely. And then you look at everything that you can control, because you get to the point, right, I can't control whether this is going to happen or not. But what can I control? Right, my health, my wellness, cut out caffeine, cut out anything. And again, I became some sort of, an absolute bore, because I was like, well, I can't touch that. I don't know if I'm pregnant. I can't have any alcohol. I can't have any caffeine.
Yep.
I must only eat pineapple at this time of the month. And I don't think Chris knew quite what to do with me, but at the same time, I had to do that for my own sanity almost.
It's strange. I just started becoming obsessed with natural remedies and stuff, and I started, which took me in the end on this path. So as they say, as I said, everything happens for a reason. Maybe this was a reason why I was supposed to discover alternative ways of living and holistic ways of living. I remember having, as well as all the needles and everything, and I never took them at the same time, but it was during the breaks. I say the breaks because you're never really on a break.
No.
Your mind certainly doesn't take a break.
No.
So during the IVF process, I'd have all the needles, suppositories, pills, all of this. And then in another cupboard, I had about 20 bottles of maca root, different types of herbs, different types of teas. And I would take all of those on the break.
Yeah, the same. And then it was just like, well, then when you weren't on the break, all right, I can't touch any of that. I can't touch any of this. So now I just have to mental time. So even, and the suppositories as well. Forgot about those pleasant parts of it too. Literally, but in mine were like tablets that I popped up my bottom.
Yes, huge.
Yeah. And so everything physical, but even with that, and we haven't even covered some of the egg extractions and the transfers. Which
that was so. I've got to say that was probably my worst experience during the whole of the IVF, because I've got a very high pain threshold.
Yes.
And I could feel everything. And I remember, because I've got to say the nurses and stuff were wonderful. And we got to know each other very well because I was going there for a long time. I remember the very first one being in so much pain. I remember saying, if we'd known you had such a high threshold, we would have hit you over the head with a hammer. And this was while I was there with my legs up in the stirrups. But it made us all laugh. So I can't thank the nurses and the doctors enough, because they were fabulous with me. But that was the worst. And then afterwards, the bloating, and it's the most bizarre feeling. I don't know whether you felt that. And you kept thinking, oh, have I got the overstimulation? I've actually forgot what they call that.
Yes, because it's that very dangerous. Again, you have to sign lots of disclaimers before going through. I never realised quite how dangerous it could be. And then, because it can cause torsion of the ovary, and then it can all burst. And these aren't the technical terms, are they? There's a name for it, which I was terrified of, and doing too much exercise in case that happened.
I couldn't move for a couple of days. My whole tummy came up like this. And I remember thinking I had that it's called overstimulation of something. It's anyway, it's a word. And I remember thinking, my God, has this happened? Because when so many bad things have happened, you think the worst all the time.
Yeah.
Every time. And that's not even talking about the 2-week wait, which is, and that's not just with IVF, that's even when you try, and that 2-week wait period. TWW, the the acronym, when you're on all the sites and you're reading of all the other women going through the same things as you. I don't know whether you did that.
Oh, I did, yeah, constantly.
It becomes an addiction.
Yes.
And the 2-week wait is when you can feel the pain through those pages and you know what it feels like. And it's awful.
Yeah. So I would say, like, all those physical things, even the risk of dying, which is a true risk of the overstimulation of the ovaries, the mental side still outweighs it for me, the toughness. And even before IVF, and the 2-week wait, and thankfully I only had one after IVF, is even more brutal. But that constant, so I was trying for our first for about 3 years, and that constant wait for your period. And with the endometriosis, I constantly felt pregnant anyway, and I constantly bloated. A lot of the symptoms of endometriosis are the same as early pregnancy symptoms. So I was like, this is it. Yes, I'm pregnant every month. And in the end, this is a big thing, losing trust of what your body is telling you. Because my body told me all the time that it felt pregnant, and I trusted it. I lost trust in my body, which is a big thing, because your body often, if you're feeling unwell, you've got to listen to it. And I lost that. And I'm only just starting to build that back up. Just ignoring me because you've misled me before. What about that time when you thought I was pregnant? What about that time when I actually was pregnant but you didn't tell me? Or what about the time that you didn't tell me that you'd lost the babe? The babe was dead inside me. Sorry, the brutal language there, but that's how I had to talk to myself.
It is brutal though.
Yeah.
And I think that is for anyone who has never undergone it and they're around people who are going through it. That is what it feels like. That language that you're using is how we speak to ourselves every day, and that's how it feels. And not just for us, for our partners as well, but obviously they don't feel the physical side effects. And it affects your relationship as well.
It does, yes.
It does. So it's not just what it's doing to your body, it's what it's doing in your own home between you and your partner or your husband, or it affects every single area. And you become a little bit resentful because you're like, right, well, we're going to do it again. But you're not the one injecting yourself every day.
Totally.
You're not the one going for an egg retrieval. You're not the one who never gets to the end of the 2-week wait, because I never did. I always bled like clockwork right at 7 days. I never even got to the end. So I never even got to that pregnancy test.
Yeah.
Never.
And the comparison, I was definitely resentful of Chris. And even when I went for the egg retrieval, they literally said to Chris, you might as well just go, there's a Costa down the road, go and get yourself a nice, they said like a nice latte or something. I was just like, oh, bloody hell, I'll just go and get the eggs pulled out my body on all these drugs. You go and have a nice latte, dear. And then, it just, and obviously it's the way it is. It's
you
biology.
Can't change it. Yes, exactly. But it doesn't matter how supportive they are, I think you always feel somewhere inside you're not going through this the same way that I'm going through this. So I think that's how it impacts relationships. And you find that a lot of relationships don't survive it.
Totally, and I can understand why. I mean, we were lucky in the fact that it brought us closer together. But that said, let's talk about sex, because that becomes an important part of it. Sex no longer was just for fun. It had a real purpose to it. Again, this is where I took control a little bit, like watching the clock, watching the calendar.
I was exactly the same.
Yeah, we need to have sex right now. And he's like, well, really right now? Like, yes, absolutely right now. And it not in a passionate way. And if I'm totally honest, we're still trying to recover from that.
It does take a long time, because sex loses its intimacy and its meaning of what it should be between yourself and your partner. It becomes something completely different, and it does take time. And I mean, I've got 2 small kids who like to sleep in the bed with me, so it really hasn't recovered due to that. But like, it's got a different purpose, so you lose that intimacy with your partner. And it does take a while to get it back. And it's so understandable how I think we're 2 of the lucky ones who have managed to get through it, and we're still with our partners, our husbands. But some people don't. And I can completely, because that could have been us at one point.
Oh, yeah, totally.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do feel lucky, but it is, one of the ways we've got through it is communicating. Yes, I'm acting like this crazy person, but this is why, and this is how I'm feeling. And it is. I was good at trying to keep open with Chris. For all I shut down with all other friends and family, I did try to communicate that, because I think if I didn't, that could have been the end.
It becomes like your little bubble, doesn't it?
Mm.
It was me, Stephen, and the dog.
Yeah. Aww.
That was our little bubble, our little Troy. He became our baby, and we kind of started creating an alternative family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because at one point, we really just thought, well, this is just not going to happen now. Mm-hmm. So that was our alternative family.
Yeah. And you do get to that way of thinking, and you have to almost, because some people say just focus, visualise, stay as positive as possible. But for me, we had to have those conversations. Mm-hmm. How does it look if we don't have children? And obviously, you only get one life. You're going to try and make the best of it no matter what. And so we had conversations like that. We were talking about maybe getting a flat in a city, focusing on our careers. Not that we don't focus on them now, but really throwing ourselves into them. How had you had those conversations? How did that look for you?
Yeah, to be honest, I was always very open that one day I would adopt. I would. And I know that's not... And that was a difficult conversation between me and Stephen, because he wasn't as open to that.
Same with Chris, actually. I was more open.
So...
Sorry to interrupt, but just a quick word about our sponsor, Be Daily. I've been subscribing to the Be Daily now since starting my business. It provides relevant and informative information directly to my inbox, not just about the North East, but also national news. If you're interested in subscribing, we'll put the link in the description box so you can get the business news directly to your inbox. Now back to the podcast.
I think if we hadn't have had children, that could have been a breaking point for us, because I would have quite happily adopted. I still would. I think there's so many kids out there that need a home. It's something that I would definitely do when mine were a little bit older.
Yeah.
But we were just going to be that couple who went on amazing holidays, lived a life and travelled, and weren't really home very much. We might have even moved, 'cause Stephen lived in Australia before we got together, and he's always wanted to go back there. Still pestering us to go back there, but the nasties scare us. So, it was just to be free and live that life without the worries that children actually do bring. Good worries, don't get me wrong. Yeah. Wonderful worries.
Yes.
But we were just going to be that carefree couple who lived a selfish life.
Yeah, for good reasons. And there will be people listening now, and I always am very conscious of people who have been on that journey and never managed to have children. And because you can't appreciate, I couldn't certainly appreciate how hard it was having kids until you have them. So you couldn't really appreciate that you had so much care, the free time.
Yeah.
I can relate to, because that's where Chris and I got to as well. But you did have children.
Yeah.
How was that experience of finding out eventually?
Well, it was so surprising, bizarre, life-changing. So I had my 4th failed IVF, and I decided, right, that's it. I think I was pretty much done at this point. I thought, I cannot put myself through this again. I am going to end up in hospital, in a mental health hospital, if I don't give myself this. I've got to stop it. So I started really focusing on myself. I started to go to the gym. I've got an amazing friend who should be a gym, and she used to take me out every day. Come on, let's focus on you. And I started to feel good. I started to get into alternative ways of looking after myself. So I started to meditate, really got into crystals, and started to just take care of myself in a different way. I'd had enough of hospitals. So I wanted to see all the different things that could help us in an alternative way. So I started doing this thing called castor oil packs. It's a really ancient Egyptian method. Castor oil is a miracle oil anyway. It's amazing. So I started doing castor oil packs. So even though I'd give up, I think in the back of my mind I hadn't give up, because a castor oil pack is something that they recommend to people with endometriosis.
I've done them myself.
fertility massage, started doing all of that, started working with crystals, started meditating, going to the gym every day, really looking after myself. And the hospital had contacted me, it was about 2 months after, and said, listen, now we're at this point and we know you want a break, Claire, do you not want to come in and we'll get the camera, have a final look in your womb so we can have a clearer picture for when you decide to come back. I was like, oh, okay then, because I'd fought for that, but they wouldn't give us it for such a long time. And now finally they were saying they were going to do it. So I said, fair enough. So my husband was working in London at the time, so I was having quite a nice time. I'd taken time off work, I was going down to London. I felt like we were dating again. I was getting excited. We'd just bought a house, so I was living back in with me nana while the house was getting prepared, and he was in London, and I would go down on a weekend, and it was, when you get giddy to see somebody again. It was it started feeling fresh and exciting again. So that mechanical side of a relationship had gone, and we were excited to be together again.
Lovely.
So I went for this appointment. He was in London. Went for this appointment, and obviously you can't put a camera in someone's womb. Woman of childbearing age, you must take a pregnancy test. I was furious because I thought I didn't really want to do this in the first place. Now you're going to make me take a pregnancy test, and I really don't want to take a pregnancy test. So I took a pregnancy test, and do you know what? The room was probably about the size of this, and I was sat on this side of the table, and I remember the nurse was there, there was windows here. I went and took the test, gave it to the nurse, she went off, and I was sat for ages, and all I could hear was all this commotion. So it was just people talking, I would hear voices. The nurse came in the room, and I just kind of got this weird feeling in my stomach. And the nurse came in the room, and she was crying, and I just looked at her, and she started crying even more, and I went, I'm not. And she went, you're pregnant. And I literally fell on the floor. I could not believe it. I just burst into tears. I was crying. I was like, I can't be. Like, how on earth am I pregnant, like, all this time? And she was saying, you're pregnant. I was like, Charlotte, I couldn't believe it. I was shaking. I feel like I'm shaking now, just putting myself back there. I got on the phone. Stephen had been working through the night, so he'd woke up the phone half asleep, and I'm screaming, I'm pregnant, down the phone. And he was like, what are you talking about? I think he thought I'd lost my mind. And I just and I was just shaking, and I didn't know what to do. And I rang my sister, and I rang my mum, and it was just one of the most magical moments of my life. I remember ringing my friends, and they were like, no way. And I was like, I'm pregnant. And it turned out I was around 7 weeks. I had to come in the next day to get an ultrasound, and it was with my team, who I'd been with for all these years. And she was doing the ultrasound, and she just looked at us and she went, there's your diamond. And in that moment, I knew I was having a girl. I just knew it was a girl. And I was 7 weeks. I'd fallen pregnant quite quickly after the last one had failed.
Wow.
So I must have kind of recovered. And and if I look back, I remember feeling a little bit tired sometimes, but just thinking it was the after effects of IVF, because you can feel crap for weeks after a failed IVF. And I remember just thinking it was that. And it wasn't. I was pregnant and I didn't know.
Oh, that story. It's just, when you were welling up, I was welling up because I know how much it means. And it means a lot anyway. When you, even without infertility battles, when you see that positive pregnancy test or get that news. But wow, yeah, I remember doing a test just before, because we were about to start IVF before we had got my first daughter. And I remember just thinking, right, I'll do a test because they'll ask me to do one. And I kind of wanted to avoid that kind of in the situation. I mean, right, so I totally knew. Anyway, I'm probably not making much sense, but Chris was about to go out to golf. It was quite early on a Sunday morning, Sunday or Monday, because it was bank holiday, and did the test and just put it on the side because I didn't like looking at them because you know, it was just being fun. But actually for this one, I was like, it's fine because, once negative, then it's fine. I know we can start progressing things. And I just couldn't believe it looking at it. And then I kind of got Chris through, and it was just like, he couldn't believe it either. And just both, like, I'm sure we shed a little tear, but then going to tell my parents, again, I'm getting goose pimples here that first time because they were crying, and just because they'd geared themselves up, like it's probably not going to happen unless they go through IVF, and yeah, just such joy, because then I had miscarriage, but I wasn't aware of them. They'd just found remnants, and so I hadn't gone through that whole. It proves it's much more of a mental thing, and so I just thought, I'm pregnant, this must mean that I'm definitely going to have a child, and luckily I did. With Camille, finding out after the IVF, so you obviously get a 2-week wait, you get the pregnancy test to take on a certain date, and you're told not to do one, and I didn't. Because to be honest, I thought there's no point, because I was having quite heavy bleeding throughout. So I had, and the clinic admitted to me at the time, after, that they thought I'd lost the baby. So I remember doing the test, and it kind of saying it was positive, but I was just not believing it because, again, having gone through miscarriages and, you know, even seeing my baby on a scan with a heartbeat, and then it suddenly not to be there. And so I was just like, no, it must be wrong. So it's totally different experiences.
Yep.
But yeah, again, just losing all faith in your body by the end of the process. So even when it's telling you chemically you are pregnant, no, not pregnant.
So even though I had such that wonderful experience of finding out I was pregnant, that pregnancy was and I think I only realised after having my second child how much that pregnancy I didn't connect to. Yeah. I think I was always a little bit scared all the way through. Yeah. Even though I hadn't gone through a miscarriage, I still couldn't believe I was pregnant. And I think I didn't enjoy it the same way I enjoyed my second pregnancy.
Yeah, mine was the other way round. Yeah, but yeah, interesting. And yeah, and we've talked so long on this topic, and I never usually input as much as I have to this conversation, but yeah, just having been through similar process. And that's the thing with infertility and IVF. Every situation is so different, so individual, but yeah, but there are experiences that I can still relate to quite a lot of it.
And I think when you find someone who has gone through something similar, because it's such an isolating experience at the time, you can't help but share stories and talk, and you could sit and talk for hours about this subject. So I think it's nice when there is a community of people out there who, even after years later, still, it's a supportive conversation, and that's the supportive conversations that need to be had.
Absolutely. So moving on, now not completely moving on, because we touched about alternative therapies and getting into that, particularly the crystal Reiki, when you were having a break. And that is actually how we met, because I think I just had another miscarriage, and I read in the newspaper, because obviously we work in the media, you'd just got some PR done, and saw that you'd embarked on this crystal Reiki journey, and how it could help people going through infertility problems. Yep. So, and like you said, you will try anything.
Absolutely.
I'd never done anything crystals before. I'd learned a little bit about Reiki, but I was just like, right, sign me up. Let me get on the phone to Claire. I can't remember how I reached out.
I think it was through Instagram.
Brilliant. And I was just like, yes, please help me. I'm about to embark on IVF. And then I knew you'd been through it all. So bless you. You were probably like a little bit of a counsellor as well. So I say actually only Chris and I knew. You also knew. But it helped. 100% it helped. And like you say, was it the sole reason we got pregnant? Maybe not, but it absolutely helped. It strengthened my mindset going into it. Helped me forgive my body, which after all those miscarriages, I think was really important, something I had to do going into this process. Can you explain, how does it help?
So, for me, I think that once you start taking care of here,
and you're pointing to your head for the people just listening.
I'm pointing to my head. Once you start taking care of the mind, the body will follow. So I'm a big proponent, although I'm a holistic therapist and I do lots of therapies, I believe that alternative therapies, medical therapies, talking therapies all work very well together. I think that is the true definition of a holistic approach. A little bit of everything. Some things work for some people, some things don't. And I will always say to anybody, because that story when I very first came out was very focused on the fertility side of things, I had a lot of people like yourself contact us asking us for fertility treatments, which is something I have never done and would never say it's a fertility treatment. I remember going through my IVF and having acupuncture and a few different alternative things, which were great. I loved them. They used to relax us and make us feel so much better. But I was kind of given this promise that this will get you pregnant. And I always promised myself I will never do that to somebody. I will never, ever say, if you use this crystal, you're going to end up pregnant. I just wouldn't do it because I know how that feels. So I've always said it's support. If you're going through fertility treatment, I've had clients with cancer going through cancer treatment, any sort of medical treatment, I think to have that extra support to relax your body, to relax your mind is amazing. It's something that can prepare you for the next step in whatever stage it is that you're going through. So for me, once I started to research crystals, and I'd always known what crystals were. As a child, I was very into Halloween and witches and all of these alternative spooky things, and I'm still like that to this day. Now's my favourite time of year. We're nearly at Halloween. It's just the type of person I am. So I always had this childlike enthusiasm for crystals and the alternative. But I lost my dad to cancer around 12 years ago now, and in the last few years of his life, he really got into meditation and things like that. And I seen what it did for him. It changed him. It brought him peace in a time when, because he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And to see meditation and things like that bring peace to someone who knows they haven't got that long left to live, it changed the way you perceive things. So I thought, if that can help me dad, maybe it can help me. So that's what started at Charlotte. That's what made me think, right, I'm going to see. And it did. I started seeing things differently. My body felt different. I started respecting my body again because I felt like I was doing something good. And the energy, and then I decided to get trained in crystal healing. That was the first thing I ever got trained in. And when you really taught how to work with crystals, really taught, and you feel that energy from them, you'll never go back. It's like magic in your hand. And I knew that when I wanted to retrain, leaving the NHS and retrain and work in holistic therapies, that I was hoping it would be people like yourself that would come to us, because it's what gave me hope in a time when I thought I had no hope at all. So as long as I've always been very clear of what the purpose of it is, it's support. It's physical support and it's mental support. And I love telling people or giving people crystals and saying, use this, or because it's kind of like a little totem. It's like something, I suppose it's like when people have a lucky charm. If they've got something on their person while they're going through or going for a treatment or going for an egg retrieval, and it's that comfort. It's that comfort that can bring comfort to the mind and the body.
Yeah, and I think in the very crudest sense, like using it as that, almost just like that, what's it called? It's gone out of my mind, where it creates an effect.
Placebo. People call it the placebo effect.
And now I'm not saying it's just a placebo, but I'm saying even if it is just that, that's amazing.
But it's interesting that you say that, because most people consider crystal healing and crystal therapy as pseudoscience. That's the way it's described by scientists and things like that. Yeah. However, even Einstein will tell you everything is energy. We're energy. This is energy. Everything around us is energy. Crystals is energy, and it's energy that's coming from the earth. It's the same as when you're grounding, when you get barefoot and you connect to that earth and you're taking in that energy, and there is scientific evidence of that and how that affects us. You've got to think these crystals are coming from the earth, and everything's got its own frequency. So within our body, we've got our chakra system. So it's energy centres. And each energy centre is represented by a different colour. Each crystal has a different colour. So you'll find crystals due to the colour, will be vibrating on the same frequency of certain chakras. So you can use certain crystals to support certain chakras. So although it's classed as pseudoscience, you just have to look further into it to see.
Yeah, Chris said the other day, because I believe in all these sorts of things, and maybe I wouldn't have until I met you, but certainly other things I've always believed in. But Chris said to me, I don't believe it unless there's scientific evidence. And I'm just like, we just haven't found it yet. You know, we still wouldn't believe in gravity if Newton hadn't discovered it. So it's just because we can't find the evidence doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
And what we're doing is it's rediscovering, because these are methods and these are things that were used way before any of us were anywhere near being on this planet. And it's as if now, and I particularly think now, and especially in the Northeast, there's a huge community coming together at the minute. And they're all going back to natural medicines and natural remedies, and it's nothing new. We're just rediscovering what once was. So, and I do think eventually the scientific community will get on board with crystals, and I think the more research that's done and the more evidence that's found, that pseudoscience will become science one day, because you just have to experience it as we have to realise the effects of what it's done for us personally.
Definitely. And people think you're either in the spiritual camp or you're in the medical scientific camp, but there's no reason why it can't flow.
Exactly.
And I think that that holistic, that fully rounded experience of everything can help. But, yeah.
I mean, hospices have Reiki practitioners working within their hospices now for end-of-life patients or cancer patients, and I think it's a wonderful thing, and I think it's something that'll grow and grow. Yeah, I really do.
I do as well. Brilliant. Have you ever had a profound kind of spiritual experience that you can't explain?
I think, for me, I certainly believe that there's another side. I certainly believe, like I said, we're all energy. I think we're all connected. I think we're connected to the earth and everything around us, and I do believe that when we pass on, we don't actually go. The more I look because I'm a forever learner, I'm always still researching, and nobody knows it all. There's always room for improvement. There's always more things to learn. And at the minute, Charlotte, I'm really into learning more about energies and how when we pass over, they're still around. And there was a time, it was a few years after my dad had passed away, and I lived in this little flat at the time. It was a downstairs flat. It was one of the first places that me and my husband had together. I remember I'd been out and I was having one of those days. You know when you're like really missing somebody? I really missed my dad, and I came home and I remember going into the back garden and thinking, I'll have one more little drink. I think my husband was working away at the time, and I sat and it was a really mild summer night. It wasn't dark, but it wasn't light. And I had all these lovely trees around, like in this little back garden, because I had the downstairs flat so I could go outside. And I sat and I thought, I'm just going to sit outside for a little bit on my own. I need to breathe. And I remember sitting there, and like I said, it was a summer's day, not a breeze in the air, nothing. And I remember sitting and putting the music on. And my dad was a musician, and he really loved his music, and I really love my music. It was probably our biggest bond that we had, our love of music. And I remember putting the music on my phone. So I used to sit in his back garden and take my phone and would play music together in the back garden, especially in the summer, because I lived with me nana and he lived here, and we would just like sort of meet in the back and then go and sit in the back garden. So I was sat and I put the music on my phone, and all of a sudden this gust of wind came, and every single tree, one by one, everything just stopped, and they all went in one direction. This gust of wind all came round, and it just stopped. And I think spiritually or supernatural, whatever you want to call it, that's the biggest time I've ever felt something that I couldn't explain. But I definitely think it was my dad.
Definitely. Because if it had just been just a general gust of wind, you wouldn't have thought anything of it. It's that feeling you get around it. And yes, there'll be people saying it was just the wind. You know, it's just all in your head because you were feeling like that. But yeah, you know what you felt. And
I could, it was almost as if I just felt them all around us. And what's another thing that's really funny when I say about music is if I'm ever having a bad day, because we all have bad days, and sometimes I'll just switch the radio on in the car and say Life on Mars or something by David Bowie will come on, which was one of our favourite songs, and I'll just think, why is that song come on right now? It's because he wants to tell me it's all right, like, it's fine.
Yeah. I've had similar experiences like that, and you just got to go with it and don't question it. And it's comforting in a way. And I think with the energies, I'd love to learn more about the research you've done into energy, but we just can't sense all of the energies. You know, even we know that obviously the wavelengths, we can't see them with the naked eye. We can feel them sometimes unexplained, but there must be other energies. Just because we can't sense it, we're really limited with our 5 senses, I believe. And I think dogs and animals have more senses, but just because we can't sense it in the
well, they say
sense.
cats just see energy, don't they?
Ah, okay.
And that's why you'll find the cat just staring into space, because they don't say what we say, they say the energies.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the end of the day, it's physics. Everything is energy. It's a law. So how people can kind of get on board with the energy of crystals or the energy of Reiki, I think it's just time, and I do think the time will come. And I know that things are changing. So many people who maybe wouldn't have believed in this 5 years ago, my husband's one of them.
Mine too.
He had a massive... I think he actually did think I'd lost the plot when I very first started changing my whole career and the way I believed and the way I thought. But he, like I said, he's a joiner by trade. And he doesn't really work on the tools as much now, but he still gets a lot of pain in his wrists sometimes. And you know what he asks for now, Charlotte?
Crystals?
Crystal healing,
Actually,
because it always helps.
I've got a sore wrist. What crystal should I be putting on my wrist? What should I be doing? Or is it something that I need an expert like yourself to help?
No, you can. So I always so when I'm working with clients, I always use like an onyx or something like that. So dark crystals, a black crystal, a grounding crystal. Tourmaline's another good one. It's really good for extracting pain and any kind of negative energy, which could be pain or anything like that. But selenite is also a really good cleansing crystal.
I think you gave me some of that one. Yeah.
So I have at my front door a big chunk of black tourmaline and a chunk of selenite, and that is to cleanse anybody of negative energies when they walk in the house. But it's the same with any energies within your body. So if I'm working with a client, I use like an black onyx or a black tourmaline to extract any blocked energies, we'll say, rather than the word negative. And then once that's cleared, you can replace it with positive energy. So a good clear quartz.
Yes.
Have that in your collection, because if you've got clear quartz, it can amplify the energy of any other crystal. It's the master healer.
Right.
So clear quartz.
Brilliant. And what, just put it on my wrist?
Yeah, you can do.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Buy jewellery.
Of course, yeah. I've got some bracelets.
Wear it.
Yeah.
So I've got, for people who can't see, I've got turquoise around my neck today. So turquoise is a really good crystal for your throat chakra. So your throat chakra controls your voice, your confidence, how you speak, which I thought was perfect for today coming on here, because I thought it would just help me to communicate more effectively.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, as a PR agency, I should invest in some of that for all
Absolutely.
of us. And we're all about voice and making sure we're sharing and amplifying our clients'
turquoise voice. Or sodalite or lapis lazuli, any blue crystals. So as I said earlier, the colour of crystals represents the frequency and the energy of it, and it matches the colour of your chakras, which is your energy centres. So blue for throat, communication, confidence. So it's even good for if you're over communicating, or you're using your voice in the wrong way.
Yes.
It can help you to speak more effectively, calmly, clearly. So
I find it all fascinating. I find the whole range.
You've got blue on as well.
Yes, I find the whole range of, and I do naturally warm to blue. You know, navy blue in the logo, and
because you're a communicator.
Yeah, it must be, you know, and it just fascinates me. There's so much that I think we all have to learn as well, and we're constantly discovering. And there's so many questions that I haven't had time to ask you today.
Oh, it's me. I talk too much. I do
No,
apologise.
it's brilliant. No, and I was talking too much on this one as well. But we're not quite finished because we've got our regular 10 questions coming up. So 1 is the worst, 10 is the best, and we ask you to rate yourself what you personally think out of these 10 questions. Right. And they're very personal, but that's the whole point. Okay, so how good looking would you say you are?
Oh my God. Let's just say, do you know what? I'm going to say a 7 because I think you should have confidence. You should be your own biggest cheerleader, but there's always room for improvement. So
brilliant. How funny are you?
I actually think I'm really funny. I don't know whether other people would agree, but I'm going to say an 8.
Fabulous. Are you a good cook?
6.
Okay. Singing?
I can hold a tune. I'll say a 7.
Brilliant. Do you drink much? Are you good at drinking?
I used to be, but I'm not anymore. Suffer now. 4.
How are you at parenting?
Oh, I'd like to think I'm up there, but I'm going to say an 8/9 because with each year, they change, you change, you're learning more. I don't think anybody could say they're a 10 because it's an evolution, isn't it?
Absolutely. How good a friend are you?
I'd say I'm a 10. I think I'm a good friend.
Awesome. An amazing friend, it sounds like. How intelligent are you?
I'll say an 8 because I love to learn. In the last year of a degree at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
I'm constantly learning about all of this stuff. Nobody's an expert when it comes to what I do because there's always new discoveries. So let's say an 8 because there's always more to learn.
Oh, absolutely. In any subject, I believe that. How kind are you?
I'm a 10. I think I'm a kind person.
Oh, loving these 10s. Is it going to be a 10 for the final question? And how good at sex are you?
Well, maybe back in the day, Charlotte, but at the minute I've got 2 little girls who like to sleep with us, so I couldn't even rank that one at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Ask us again when they're a little bit older.
Oh, yeah, I'd say exactly the same right now. But brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. I appreciate it.
Hi, it's Ryan from Harvey and Hugo and I am the videographer here. So are you looking for a new way to stand out in today's crowded digital landscape? Well, look no further than podcasting. Here at Harvey and Hugo, we specialise in creating and producing high quality podcasts that engage and inspire audiences. And with our comprehensive production services, we'll take care of all the technical details, from the recording and the editing to the distribution and the promotion. With millions of listeners tuning in every day, it's the perfect time to start connecting with them on a deeper level. Let Harvey and Hugo help you unlock the power of podcasting and take your message to the next level.